Historians frequently begin the tale of Rome's decline and fall with the accession of Commodus, a mad emperor who was more concerned with demonstrating his gladiatorial prowess than the actual government of the empire. It seems that despite being born to the Stoic philosopher king Marcus Aurelius, Commodus had none of his father's positive qualities. In fact, it is often claimed that since Commodus was the first ever surviving biological male heir of an emperor, that his privileged upbringing kept him too out of touch to rule effectively. Throughout his 12-year reign, Commodus frequently reminded people that he was born to the purple, but he would be succeeded by a man whose background was the exact opposite. Commodus's successor was Pertinax, the son of a freed slave, and a man whose meteoric ascent to the height of Roman power was made possible through his capabilities as a military commander and civil administrator, not blue blood or family connections. Pertinax had all the characteristics of an excellent emperor, and his unlikely rise represented the incredible societal changes occurring in the prosperous 2nd century. But Pertinax would only reign for 87 days, and his futile attempts to reverse the chaos of Commodus would prove to be a false dawn. Rome would not be able to reverse course. The century of warfare looming on the horizon would irreparably fracture the empire, and men like Pertinax would be nowhere to be found. When Commodus was assassinated, he was still a young man and left no heir, biological or adopted. The decision to kill him was not undertaken with the intent of putting a specific person on the throne. Rather, it had been an act of self-preservation by his mistress and several members of his household staff, after they discovered they were due to be executed for supposed crimes against the state. But remembering the devastating civil war that had followed the death of Nero, the assassins sought out a distinguished elder statesman whom they believed would be universally acclaimed by the Senate. They selected 66-year-old Publius Helvius Pertinax, an esteemed senator and former commander who does not seem to have been involved in the plot to kill Commodus. Historians report that he was unsure whether the offer was legitimate or an elaborate ruse by Commodus to identify disloyal senators. This example of Pertinax's canniness can help us understand how he managed to be one of only a few close associates of Marcus Aurelius to survive the despotic reign of Commodus. Pertinax refused to even think of accepting the job until one of his personal slaves was able to view Commodus's corpse. Still, even though the emperor was dead, Pertinax knew that accepting the top job remained incredibly risky. The conspirators he was throwing in his lot with needed a new emperor acclaimed and solidified in his position quickly, before word of Commodus's death ever reached the ears of an ambitious provincial governor who had a legion at his command. Pertinax knew that unless he received the immediate support of the Praetorian Guard and the universal acclaim of the Senate, he would face rival claimants, and Rome would be dragged into its first civil war in over a century. Pertinax knew that he was taking a chance by agreeing to be elevated, but his rise from humble origins to the heights of the Senate was made possible by his willingness to seize every opportunity that presented itself. Pertinax's father was a freed slave who invested heavily in two things: the Italian lumber business and the education of his son. His decisions resulted in riches for the family, and for Pertinax, the qualifications needed to rise within the Roman strict hierarchical society. In ancient Rome, qualifications were not advanced degrees, but rather the wealth and status required to achieve equestrian or senatorial rank, because the number one question on Roman job applications tended to be, "So exactly how much money does your dad have?" Pertinax's expensive education does seem to have inspired a contemplative streak in the boy, as he spent some years as a teacher in his 20s. Remarkable, because this was a profession that was utterly out of step with the expectations for a talented young aristocrat. But this didn't last too long, and Pertinax would ultimately leverage family connections to receive an army command. With no military experience, he was named a prefect in charge of a cohort of auxiliary infantry. His appointment was a sign of both how important it was to know the right people, and also how willing the Romans were to entrust the lives of their foreign soldiers to anyone who had a good family name and knew how to read. Despite his late start to military life, Pertinax made an excellent soldier and was rapidly promoted, receiving equestrian status and even being named a senator by Marcus Aurelius himself in 175. as well as being awarded command of an entire legion. This rapid ascent from the lowly position of freedman's son to the halls of senatorial power was made possible by two key factors: Marcus Aurelius's propensity to promote men of talent, and the devastating Antonine Plague, which had left so many openings in the army and senate to be filled by Pertinax and others who lacked an illustrious pedigree. Pertinax would ultimately repay Marcus Aurelius's decision to elevate him many times over through competent work in the civil administration and as a provincial governor. He earned respect for his honesty and integrity, but also his ability to deliver results. During the crisis of the 3rd century, it would be almost impossible for men with established success in the provinces to resist the allure of the top job. But the idea of deposing the emperor does not even appear to have crossed Pertinax's mind. He was a stalwart civil servant who personified the stability and success of the prosperous 2nd century. But when reassured that Commodus was dead, he found himself thrust towards the throne. Though a respected senator, Pertinax knew where power truly lay, and his first stop was the barracks of the Praetorian Guard. Laetus, the prefect of the guard, was a member of the conspiracy that had killed Commodus, but the rank-and-file Praetorians were told that he died of natural causes. Knowing that he needed an army to back his claim to the throne, Pertinax offered each soldier an astounding sum of 12,000 sesterces to support him. Only then, after having bought the guard, did he seek acclamation by the Senate. With an army at his back, this naturally went off without a hitch. Well, there were some complications. The Senate found themselves locked out of their traditional meeting house in the wee hours of the January morning, and, after standing outside in the cold for some time, eventually decided to transfer the meeting over to the nearby Temple of Concord. Because of this hurdle, convening the meeting actually proved harder than winning the Senate's approval for his accession to the throne. While the Senate had long ago been cowed into submission, it's noteworthy that no one seems to have objected to the son of a freedman becoming princeps. Perhaps the august body had been so altered by Marcus Aurelius's meritocratic promotion and Commodus's purges of the wealthy and influential that many of the men there were only a generation or two removed from slavery themselves. Now confirmed as princeps, Pertinax immediately got to the massive task at hand, reversing the absolute mess that Commodus had made of the Roman state. The Senate would not be his partner in the needed transformation. The once prestigious body now passed a number of increasingly hysterical condemnations of Commodus and his memory, but took no meaningful steps to involve itself in the governing of the empire. Pertinax renounced Commodus's tyranny and swore an oath that he would never execute a senator. He also enacted a massive austerity campaign designed to alleviate the financial straits in which the empire found itself after years of Commodus's mismanagement. Luxurious goods from the palace were auctioned off, including the slaves that had made up Commodus's harem. Not only did this raise half the funds necessary for the donation Pertinax had promised the Praetorian Guard, but it was probably also good PR for a new emperor looking to endear himself to the urban poor. Maybe Pertinax could personally survive in the austere conditions of a Stoic, but his problems began when he started demanding that the Praetorian Guard share some of his sacrifices to the greater good. Channeling his past as a successful general, Pertinax worked to reinstill the brutal discipline of the legions in the famously lax Praetorian Guard. He needed to make the Guard into an efficient fighting force in the event a provincial governor ever challenged his claim, but the Praetorians only resented him for treating them like mere enlisted soldiers. Tension was compounded by guardsmen who felt that the 12,000 sesterces they had been promised was inadequate, and it only took a few weeks for Praetorian malcontents to advance new candidates for emperor. Pertinax honored his promise to never harm a senator by not punishing the potential replacements who had been selected by the Guard, but he had no qualms about executing the mutinous Praetorians themselves for their breach of faith. While he doubtlessly intended this as a magnanimous gesture, it only made the Praetorians feel that he had a particular disdain for them. What began as grumbling had festered into resentment. The situation was rapidly escalating. The powder keg would explode on March 28, 193, when a contingent of guardsmen numbering roughly 300 entered the palace demanding an audience with Pertinax. Rather than flee, Pertinax, who was ever the pragmatist, agreed to meet the men, as he believed that they would see reason. He was sorely mistaken. A disgruntled praetorian killed the emperor after negotiations broke down. He had only held the throne for 87 days, but Pertinax was slain by praetorians for trying to rein in the corruption which had festered under Commodus. In many ways, this was a true turning point for Roman politics. The Principate of Augustus died with Pertinax, and the empire would not know peace until Diocletian reimagined the Roman state with the inauguration of the Tetrarchy. Pertinax remains a fascinating what-if point in Roman history. It's tempting to believe that had a man of his caliber reigned any longer, he could have averted the crisis of the 3rd century. I'm skeptical of this view, as it discounts the degree to which the empire had fundamentally changed, and the bitter fact that those brought up in the mold of Marcus Aurelius were unable to come to terms with the unsavory realities of the new world they found themselves in. Pertinax is a tragic case because his problems did not arise due to bad governance. Scholars today would all say that he was right about the need to rein in the guard, the importance of respecting senators, and the danger posed by ambitious provincial governors. However, it was precisely because he decided to tackle these very real problems that he met his downfall at the hands of those who profited from a status quo that worked for a select few within the empire, but undermined the interests not just of the poor masses, but of the very state itself. Pertinax stood against the forces shaping the politics and economics of his day and tried meeting them with common sense and integrity. He lost badly. No one likes a historical determinist, but it should not be controversial to say that the fate of Pertinax demonstrates how the rot at the center of the Roman state was now far beyond the ability of any one man, even an emperor governing properly, to reverse. Rome's century of peace and prosperity had been bought on credit, achieved by neglecting very real problems at the core of the imperial system, and now, with the death of Pertinax and the beginning of a new civil war, that bill was finally coming due.
Hi, this is Titus from Tribunet. If you enjoyed the video you just saw by Gaius, and if you're interested in thoughtful content that explores the complex culture of the ancient Romans, don't forget to hit like and subscribe.